While living in Genoa, Arkansas, at some point a good portion of the family decided to move to Kansas City, Missouri. This included Leroy and Ruby Morgeson, Joe Pearson, twins Elvin and Sharp Pearson, Snooks, Harriet Pearson, and Arthur and Lottie Rose. Arthur and Lottie were the first to make the move. When asked about why Kansas City was chosen, the answer I received the most was because of employment opportunities. When compared to rural Genoa, it's likely Kansas City offered a lot more opportunities in that area. The plan appeared to be in full motion by the late 1950s. The creation of the Hill has to be one of the most fascinating stories that anyone can tell about their families in recent times. The Hill was a street of 8 houses that was initiated by Elvin Pearson with a number of other family members, friends, and associates helping. Family members that gave a helping hand included Larry Bailey, Leslie Pearson, Bill Morgeson, and of course, Elvin's children, Wesley and Winston Pearson. Wesley Pearson stated that he was required to help every weekend and actually learn the roofing trade from helping a lot with the roofs on the hill. Winston Pearson was mainly in charge of concrete work. In hindsight, this was not a good idea. First up is what I refer to as Harriet's house at 7420 East 57th Street. It is a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1,550 square foot house built in 1958. Ernie and Biggin were the first to live in this house, along with their son Winston. Later, Harriet and Snooks, along with their kids, moved in while the house next door was being built. This is primarily known as the house of Harriet and Snooks, otherwise known as Virgil Pearson. Wesley Pearson also stayed with them for a short while he was in high school at this location. After Harriet and Snooks moved to Norfleet School, it was rented out to others, which included Dana and Tanya Kahn. Dana is Kathy's brother. The only time I was ever dog bit was in this house. Dana and Kathy's dog Tucker bit me, who was actually a Cocker Spaniel. Funny story, I remember my sister Tammy was babysitting us, and I asked to play Nintendo, in which she said no. And a short while later, I was petting Tucker, and Chris said, "He's going to bite you." And I looked at Tammy and I said, "Willie?" And she just kind of shook her head in annoyance, like, "No, he's not going to bite you." And the next thing I know, I was rolling on the ground, fighting for my life. Didn't know Cocker Spaniels were such mean dogs. At least Tucker was, anyway. But that's what I think of whenever I see that house, or at least one of the things that comes to mind in addition to Harriet and Snooks. Okay, right across the street we have 7422 East 57th Street, what I remember as Winston's house at the top of the hill. The first occupant was Harriet and Snooks, and they lived there for a while before moving back to their original location across the street at 7420. This house was rented to a Malcolm Wells for 10 to 15 years before Nancy Morgeson and family would move into it. After they moved out, it was then the home of Winston and Marcia, along with their 3 kids, Christy, Aaron, and Derek.
Next on the list is 5624 Palmer, also known as Grandma and Grandpa's house. As this house was being built, Ernie and Biggin would move in and occupy the home for many years. They first lived in the basement while the upstairs was being worked on, which kind of shows how big the house actually is. Nancy Morrison and family lived in the basement before moving to 7422 East 57th at the top of the hill. The basement of this house and a couple of the others was ginormous. You could easily live in the basement and have plenty of space, which we did for a time or two. This, of course, is the house that had the pool. A story I remember from Winston, or my dad, is during the construction of the pool, the concrete was not all done at the same time. Winston cites this being for the reason for the leaks. I can remember the pool would have a constant leak and it ran down towards the bottom of the hill because they did not know it had to be poured all in one piece. I'm not sure how much fun was had in this pool, but it was a great idea. Unfortunately, I don't think it worked out the way it was planned. For my lifetime, it was always an algae water and not well maintained. Me, Christy, and Aaron used to walk down the wall outlined in red on the photo. It was large enough to cross, but it was just small enough to where I got a little nervous. I'm surprised to this day no one ever fell into the pool, which I'm probably sure probably happened at one point.
The next house is 5625 Palmer, mostly known as Olivia's house. This house was first occupied by Glenn Sawyer and his wife, but it's been primarily known for its next occupant, which was Olivia and Joe Jackson, along with their two kids, Jeff and Joey. According to records, it looks like they were there until at least the early 2000s. This is the only house on the hill that never actually had a family member living in it. The next house is 5618 Palmer, or what I remember as Chris Kahn's house, what most people probably remember as Arthur and Lottie's house. This house was Skip and Arthur and Grace's house. After Arthur passed away, Skip would eventually move in with Ernie and Biggin at 5624. Biggin then rented the house out to a few other people, including Scott and Kathy Pearson, an unknown woman and her kids who Ernie apparently did not like, and she was not there very long. Then came Dana and Tanya Kahn. Eventually, Biggin sold the house to a man named Dennis Dodd, and it was eventually sold to a man named Mac.
5619 Palmer is the next house. Joe and Linda's house. Joe and Linda were the original owners and they lived in it a long time. Most remember Joe and Linda being the last to move on the hill.
I can remember hanging out with Stephanie in the basement, and I can remember they had a microwave in the basement, and I can remember her cooking chicken nuggets, and they were really, really good. And I remember Linda being like, wait a minute, you guys cook chicken nuggets? Next on the list is 5612 Palmer, or what I remember as our house. Of course, Ruby and Leroy Morgeson were the first to live in it. They sold it back to Biggin after they left, and eventually Wesley Pearson moved in thereafter. Teresa Pearson also lived in this house for a short while. Charlie Sinclair also lived in this house with Wesley as well. Eventually, Wes would marry Norma Pearson, and they would both live here, as would I and my sisters, Wendy and Tammy. All kinds of good memories in this house, from the trampoline in the backyard. Of course, You can see the wall that tumbled over again, and again, remember Winston was in charge of the concrete work. Even my sister had friends. It was a great time. The birthday parties. Look at it, how happy everybody looks in this photo. A lot of good times had at this house. Of course, we all missed the hill, and this was definitely one of the more significant houses to me, obviously. A lot of good memories here. And finally, we have 5613 Palmer, or what I remember as Craig's house, and I also remember the house being blue. Unfortunately, we don't have any more pictures of this house. Terry and Sue Morgeson lived in the house with daughters Paula and Connie. After they moved out, it was sold to an unknown couple for quite a while. Finally, the Pickens family moved in with son Craig, and that is how I remember the house. Craig was around my age, and I would go across the street and play with him from time to time. They occupied the house for many years thereafter and eventually sold the house.